The auction block had seen cattle, horses, and farm equipment, but never a 17-year-old girl standing with her chin raised like she was daring the world to break her. Lucy Chen clutched the carpet bag containing everything she owned: 2 dresses, her mother's jade bracelet, and a letter from the territorial orphanage declaring her unsuitable for domestic placement due to willful nature and incidents of violence. The crowd of ranchers and townsfolk gathered in Willowbrook's dusty main street studied her like she was a rattlesnake in a Sunday bonnet. "Bid starts at $50 for a year's indenture," announced Mayor Caldwell, mopping sweat from his forehead. "Girls strong enough for farm work can read and cipher. Can she cook?" called out Mrs. Henley from the crowd. "Well, can she follow orders without backtalk?" This from rancher Tom Bradley, whose last 3 hired hands had quit after his wife's sharp tongue drove them off. Mayor Caldwell's uncomfortable silence stretched like taffy. Everyone in 3 counties had heard about Lucy Chen, the half-Chinese girl who'd put Sheriff Morrison's nephew in the hospital after he'd tried to force himself on her behind the schoolhouse. Self-defense, some said. Attempted murder, said others. Either way, no decent family wanted that kind of trouble under their roof. "She's got a temper," Caldwell finally admitted. "Orphanage says she needs a firm hand. We don't want her." Bradley cut him off. "She's broken. Look at those eyes, wild as a Mustang and twice as mean. Ain't no amount of beating gonna fix what's wrong with that one." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Lucy felt her face burn, but she kept her expression stone still. She'd learned years ago that showing pain only made people hurt you worse. "Anyone else?" Caldwell's voice held desperation. If nobody took the girl, she'd be sent to the territorial prison to work off her debt to society. 17 was old enough for hard labor, and her mixed blood made her expendable. $50. The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep and calm as Winter Creek water. Every head turned toward a tall man leaning against the hitching post, broad shoulders, weathered face, and eyes the color of sage smoke. He wore working clothes and a battered hat, but something about him commanded attention. "Then she's mine," Garrett Sullivan said, stepping into the circle. The crowd parted like he was Moses walking through the Red Sea. Garrett Sullivan counted out $50 in worn bills, each one hitting Mayor Caldwell's palm like a judgment. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the transaction played out, this stranger buying what no one else wanted. "You sure about this, mister?" Caldwell asked, eyeing the money like it might bite him. "Girl comes with no guarantees. Orphanage won't take her back if she causes trouble." "Understood." Garrett's voice held no doubt, but Lucy caught something in his eyes when he looked at her. Not the calculating assessment she'd grown used to, but something that almost looked like recognition. Mrs. Henley pushed through the crowd, her face pinched with concern. "Mr. Sullivan, is it? You got a wife to handle a girl like that? Young man like yourself, living alone with an indentured servant? Well, folks might talk. Let them." Garrett folded the receipt into his shirt pocket. "Miss Chen, gather your things." Lucy stood frozen, every instinct screaming danger. In her experience, men who wanted broken things usually planned to break them further, but what choice did she have? The alternative was territorial prison, where mixed-blood girls disappeared into unmarked graves. "Where you taking her?" Bradley demanded, stepping closer. "You got a spread around here. Nobody knows you from Adam. Ranch about 20 miles north. Been working cattle up in Wyoming, decided to settle closer to civilization." Garrett's tone was conversational, but Lucy noticed how his hand rested easy near the gun on his hip. "Any other questions?" The crowd shifted uneasily. Strangers were always suspect in small towns, especially ones with enough money to buy indentured servants without blinking. "Wyoming, you say?" This from a lean man with a deputy's badge. "What outfit you work for up there?" "Worked for myself mostly. Small operation." Garrett's eyes never left the deputy's face. "Problem with that?" Before the deputy could answer, the thunder of approaching hooves cut through the tension. A group of riders crested the hill at the edge of town, moving fast and kicking up a dust cloud that caught the afternoon light like smoke. Lucy's blood turned to ice water. She knew that lead rider, broad shoulders, cruel mouth, and a badge that gave him license to hurt people like her. Sheriff Morrison, nephew to the boy she'd put in the hospital.
"Oh well.
The deputy muttered, a nasty smile spreading across his face. "Looks like the sheriff's back from the territorial capital. Wonder what he'll think about this little transaction." Garrett's hand shifted closer to his gun. Guess we'll find out. The riders were close enough now that Lucy could see Morrison's face, cold as January and twice as merciless. Sheriff Morrison reined in his horse hard enough to make the animal dance sideways, his cold eyes scanning the crowd before settling on Lucy like a hawk spotting prey. Dust swirled around the 5 riders, and the jingle of spurs and bridle chains filled the sudden quiet. Heard there was an auction today, Morrison said, dismounting with deliberate slowness. Funny thing though, nobody thought to inform the law about selling off attempted murderers. She's been cleared for indenture, Mayor Caldwell stammered, clutching the money like a lifeline. All proper paperwork from the territorial office. Paperwork. Morrison spat in the dirt, his gaze never leaving Lucy's face. You know what that girl did to my nephew? Broke 3 ribs, shattered his collarbone, damn near caved in his skull with a fence post. After he tried to force himself on her, someone called from the crowd. Lucy couldn't see who didn't dare take her eyes off Morrison, but she felt a flutter of surprise that anyone would speak up. Morrison's laugh was sharp as broken glass. That what she told you? My nephew's a good Christian boy. Girl like her. Well, half-breeds got different ideas about virtue than decent folks. The words hit like physical blows, but Lucy had heard worse. What chilled her was the way Morrison's hand rested on his gun butt, casual as a man adjusting his hat. Sheriff. Garrett's voice cut through the tension, calm as deep water. Transactions done legal. You got a problem with that? Morrison's attention shifted to Garrett, and Lucy saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. Don't believe we've been introduced, stranger. Garrett Sullivan, bought the Jameson place north of here. Jameson place been empty 3 years. What makes you think it's for sale? Bank in Denver thought different. Garrett's tone never changed, but Lucy caught the slight shift in his stance, weight balanced, ready for trouble. Paid cash for the deed yesterday. The crowd murmured at this news. The Jameson ranch was good land, and cash buyers were rare in these parts. Morrison circled Garrett like a wolf testing for weakness. Mighty convenient, buying land right when there's a dangerous half-breed up for auction. Mighty convenient indeed. What are you suggesting, Sheriff? Suggesting maybe you got particular interests in damaged goods. Maybe we should check your credentials a little closer before we let you ride off into the sunset. Morrison's deputies spread out, surrounding Garrett and Lucy in a loose circle. The crowd backed away, sensing violence in the air like the smell of lightning before a storm. Course, Morrison continued, his smile cold as Winter Creek ice, could save us all some trouble if you just walked away now. Leave the girl to proper justice. Asterisk. Garrett's eyes found Lucy's across the circle of armed men, and in that moment, something passed between them, an understanding born of shared recognition. She saw it then, what she'd missed before, the careful way he held himself, like a man carrying invisible wounds, the slight favoring of his left leg, the faded scar that disappeared beneath his collar. You know what, Sheriff? Garrett said quietly, never breaking eye contact with Lucy. I think I'll keep what I paid for. That's so. Morrison's hand dropped to his gun, even if it means trouble, especially then. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lucy felt something crack open in her chest, not the bitter armor she'd worn since childhood, but something warmer. No one had ever chosen her, especially not when choosing meant danger. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it, barely above a whisper. Garrett's smile was gentle as summer rain. Because I know what it's like to be called broken by people who never bothered to see what you're really made of. Morrison stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. This ain't over, Sullivan. Girl's got blood on her hands, and blood calls to blood. You take her, you take that trouble too. Reckon I can handle it. Can you handle what comes after? When my nephew heals up and comes looking for satisfaction, when word spreads that you're harboring a violent half-breed, this territory's got ways of dealing with troublemakers. The threat was clear as church bells. Lucy watched Garrett's face, waiting for the moment his resolve would crack. Men always had breaking points, and Morrison was good at finding them, but Garrett just adjusted his hat and stepped closer to Lucy. Miss Chen, you ready to go home? The word hit her like a physical thing. Home. She'd never had one, not since her parents died in the influenza outbreak 8 years ago. The orphanage had been survival, nothing more. Yes, sir, she managed. Morrison's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, Sullivan. Bigger one than you know, maybe." Garrett picked up Lucy's carpet bag, handling it like it held precious things. "But it's mine to make." In the distance, thunder rumbled across the mountains, promising rain before nightfall. The crowd began to disperse, unwilling to witness what might come next. But Morrison and his deputies remained, watching like buzzards circling a dying thing. 6 months later, Lucy stood in the doorway of the ranch house kitchen, watching Garrett work a young Mustang in the corral. The horse had been wild caught and half-starved when he'd brought it home, another broken thing that needed patience more than force. The transformation had been gradual, like watching ice melt in spring. Garrett never raised his voice, never lifted a hand in anger, even when Lucy tested him with all the sharp edges she'd learned to use as weapons. Instead, he'd shown her the ranch books, taught her to read cattle brands, listened when she talked about her parents' stories of China. "You're good with numbers," he'd said one evening, watching her balance the ledgers. "Better than good. You ever think about keeping books for other ranchers?" The idea had seemed impossible then, a half-breed girl with a violent reputation running a business. But word had spread quietly about her skills, and now 3 neighboring ranchers paid her to manage their accounts. The sound of hoofbeats broke her from her memories. A single rider approached, not the thunder of Morrison's posse, but someone moving careful and slow. Lucy's hand went instinctively to the rifle by the door, a habit Garrett had never discouraged. But the rider was young Tom Bradley, hat in hand and shame written across his face. "Miss Chen," he called from the gate. "Got a proposition for you." Garrett appeared at her shoulder, dusty from working the horses. "What kind of proposition?" "My pa, well, he's been thinking about what he said at the auction." Tom's voice cracked like he was 13 again. "Turns out he was wrong. About you being broken, I mean." Lucy stepped onto the porch, surprised by her own calm. 6 months ago she would have met this with fury. Now she just waited. "Pa heard how you been helping folks with their books. How you stood up to Morrison when he tried to shake down the widow Garrett for back taxes." Tom's eyes found hers. "He wanted me to say he's sorry, and to ask if you might consider doing our books too." Through the kitchen window, Lucy caught sight of her reflection, no longer the wild-eyed girl from the auction block, but someone who belonged somewhere, someone who had value beyond what others thought she lacked. "I'll consider it," she said simply. After Tom rode away, Garrett took her scarred hand in his work-roughened one. "Regret staying?" Lucy looked across their land, the horses, the cattle, the life they'd built from nothing but stubbornness and hope. In the distance, mountains caught the last light like promises. "Never," she said, and meant it down to her bones. The Mustang in the corral whinnied, wild and free and unbroken, just learning to trust.